TV media, our electronic media is unwatchable. They're actively making you hate each other on the basis of your religion, sometimes your caste, and actively delegitimizing India's opposition parties, where you are not questioning the government, but you're questioning the opposition at all times.
इस धोखे के हमले में जो अपनों का काम नहीं होता, पुलवामा में उन वीरों का ये अंजाम नहीं होता.
That whole idea in that moment was कि भाई, don't blame Pakistan for this. This is people living amongst us. Religion doesn't stand for you saying कि आप अगर Muslim हो या Christian हो तो आप हमसे नीचे हो. Right? That is not what the religion at all stands for. बहुत पैसा है उनके पास. They have a budget of about 40,000 odd crores if I'm not wrong.
Really?
Asking people, I said, what do you want? Do you want to live in a la-la land where the government can do what it wants? You'll never know any of it, and the only thing that you will get is WhatsApp messages saying कि ये बन गया वो बन गया. Is that the la-la land that the citizens of the country want to live in?
Yo, what is up, my friends? Welcome to another episode of Dostcast. मेरा नाम है विनम्र कसाना. आज के हमारे गेस्ट का नाम है कुणाल पुरोहित. I interviewed him 2-3 years ago on my other channel. He's come out with a book called H-Pop, The Secretive World of Hindutva Pop Stars. It's an excellent conversation talking about किस तरह से पॉपुलर कल्चर के अंदर शायरी के माध्यम से, गानों के माध्यम से भिन्न भिन्न प्रकार की विट्रियोलरिक पोलराइजिंग आइडेंटिटीज़ जो होती हैं उनको बढ़ावा दिया जाता है. किस तरह से बहुत सारे क्या कहते हैं सिंगर्स वगैरह हैं जो यूट्यूब पे गाने बनाते हैं, वो शिकार हो जाते हैं कि व्यूज़ कम आ रहे हैं तो चलो एक काम करते हैं, प्रो हिंदुत्वा कंटेंट बना देते हैं. We spoke about his journalism, about him traveling to several parts of India, discovering the secret world and how it's being used to polarize the youth in the country. And we discussed some facts. We discussed what is the state of journalism in the country right now, and many other things. I think you will like this conversation. Please listen to it with an open mind. And the episode with Kunal Purohit begins in 3, 2, 1. I just want to read something from your new book, H-Pop, The Secretive World of Hindutva Pop Stars. अगर छुआ मंदिर तो तुझे दिखा देंगे, तुझको तेरी औकात बता देंगे, इधर उठी जो आँख तुम्हारी चमकेगी तलवार कटारी, खून से इस धरती को नहला देंगे, हम तुझको तेरी औकात बता देंगे, वंदे मातरम गाना होगा वरना यहाँ से जाना होगा, नहीं गए तो जबरन तुझे भगा देंगे, हम तुझको तेरी औकात बता देंगे. Where are these lyrics from?
So this is a very famous song in the Hindutva pop music pantheon, and some of this, including this song, what has happened is over the years there have been so many iterations, so many versions of these songs that have come out that it's very difficult to then trace it back कि भाई original कौन सा था. So this is one such song. When if you type some of these words on YouTube, you'll get number of versions of this song. But what's interesting about this song is that this is one of the most popular Ramnavmi songs, especially in the states that I have visited, namely places in and around Jharkhand, where this song is one of the sort of go-to songs whenever there's a Ramnavmi procession that is playing out, and especially when it's passing through, an area which has a mosque, maybe a lane, maybe right outside the mosque as well. So as an experiment, what you can do is you can type these lyrics in YouTube and just see the number of shots that you'll get of this song, right? Where there will be this song playing when a procession is right outside a mosque, and typically Ramnavmi mein aisa hota hai ki it's also Shakti Puja. So you have rods, you have sticks, you have talwars, so processionists are carrying all of this. और उसमें ये जब गाना बजता है वो भी एक मॉस्क के सामने, तो उसका एक माहौल जो है वो बहुत अलग बन जाता है. The aggression sort of reaches a zenith in some ways.
रामनवमी हमेशा ही इतनी politicized होती है या this is a recent phenomenon?
So interestingly, Ramnavmi has historically always been somewhat of a polarizing moment. And if you go back to colonial era records as well, you will find that Ramnavmi पे riots होना कोई uncommon चीज़ नहीं थी. Ramnavmi used to have different riots, especially in places in and around Jharkhand. In fact, Jamshedpur was has been historically a bit of a sensitive area, if you can call it that. The nature of how and why the riot happens is now changing. It's not the event in itself. अब क्या हो रहा है, वो किस वजह से राइट हो रहा है, that is now in a bit of a flux. And one of the factors that's driving the new reason for the riot is Hindutva music, as I've sort of spoken about in the book as well.
आपने in the earlier part you mentioned कि there was a young Muslim youth, right? And you were in the village of Gumla.
It's a town called Gumla.
Yeah, it's a town called Gumla. What were you doing in Gumla, and what was the genesis of this book? Because I think this will also set context for the rest of the conversation.
So this was in 2018 when I was traveling across the country. I was going to different parts of the country because we were seeing a spurt in hate crimes, in religion-centric hate crimes, where people were killing each other or assaulting each other, or there were riots because of each other's religion. And I was involved with a database which was tracking a lot of these hate crimes. The database was run by a news website called India-Spend.
Okay.
And they had a hate crime tracker of sorts. My job as a journalist was to actually go on the ground and see whether what we were categorizing on the database as hate crimes were indeed hate crimes, or were they linked to something else. Was it a personal enmity? Was it a dispute of some sort? So as a result of that coverage that I was doing, as a result of the investigation that I was doing on the ground, I found myself in Gumla in 2018, which was a year later. I started doing all of this in 2018. And I found myself in Gumla 2019, a year later, after going through different parts of the country. Gumla में एक hate crime हुआ था, and I was there to investigate what had happened. Interestingly, what I found when I went to that spot where the hate crime had happened was that I spoke to a lot of people, and it turns out that hate crime had happened on the day of the Ramnavmi procession. Gumla had historically, seen this syncretic tradition where, Hindus would sort of, come in large numbers, or Jharkhand mein Ramnavmi is a procession where tens of thousands and sometimes even more people come out on the streets and join the procession. और वो procession शहर के एक कोने से निकल के it will snake its way around the whole city or the whole town or the whole village and end typically in front of the Ram Mandir or the Hanuman Mandir or
stuff. किताब में starting में लिखा हुआ है कि the people outside the mosque were supposedly welcoming the procession with open arms because it's a default process.
It's a syncretic tradition where हिंदू आते हैं, मुसलमान वहाँ के, और वहाँ के जो आसपास के दुकानदार हैं, हिंदू मुसलमान दोनों, वो मस्जिद के बाहर खड़े होते हैं. they welcome each other. The Hindus are very amiable, so are the Muslims. फिर वो procession वहाँ से आगे चला जाता है. And this is the main Jama Masjid of Gumla. That particular time when the procession entered the lane where the Jama Masjid is, उसी समय कोई एक गाना बज जाता है and the माहौल changes, वो mood थोड़ा सा change हो जाता है. Locals who were eyewitnesses, both Hindus and Muslims, told me कि the procession suddenly had a very different energy to it. It felt a lot more hostile and a lot more aggressive. And one of the things that, after repeatedly asking people, one of the things that I figured had changed from the previous times to that procession in that moment was that उस procession में एक गाना बजता है जिसके lyrics are something to the effect. It's been very difficult to pin down exactly what, but multiple people told me that the lyrics were something to the effect कि ये मुल्ले की टोपी गिरा दो, right? Knock the skull cap off the cleric's head. Now this can have various interpretations, but nonetheless it is an act of hostility. It's not an act of sort of cordial behavior or syncretism or any of that. और उस गाने की वजह से in that moment there is a sense of tension, क्योंकि the Muslims who are waiting outside the mosque suddenly don't know what to expect. Some of the Hindus, the shopkeepers and stuff who were also looking out, didn't really know what was happening here because this was not what they were anticipating. तो उस moment में police intervene कर जाती है, they shut the music, a riot is almost averted in that moment, और वो procession आगे चला जाता है. That night, when some of these processionists who were in that procession at that point, when they were going back, is when they found this 20-year-old Muslim boy talking to a Hindu girl from a village about 2-3 kilometers away from that spot, in a village called Soso. Or the interesting part is they know this guy. मेरी इन्वेस्टिगेशन से पता चला कि वो जो अक्यूज्ड थे वो आए थे इसकी एक शॉप होती करती थी उसके फादर की. They used to come to the shop. They knew the guy as well. They knew the father, so they knew who this guy was. But in that moment, when they saw him talking to the Hindu girl,
भूल गए
वो सारा कुछ भूल गए, and they decided that he has to be tied to the electric pole and then he has to be assaulted till he dies. And that guy died that night. Mohammed Shalik is his name. वो उस दिन मर गया. And that is generally the point at which I got interested in the topic because I was fascinated. I said, what kind of songs are these? That have caused tensions to rise in that moment. The causality may be one thing. We're not, no, it's no one's argument that the song possibly, caused them to kill this guy. But the song did create tensions in that moment. Maybe the tensions spilled over when they finally saw this guy talking to a Hindu girl. And I was interested in just what these songs were and, who was creating them, right? Ye gaane kahan baj rahe the? Because I come from Bombay. And no one in Bombay was playing these songs. I have friends all over different parts of the country in metros.
Yeah.
No one's playing these
Bombay
songs.
is a very, very syncretic city.
Very syncretic.
Probably the
city.
most syncretic in the country.
Possibly. And we didn't hear any of these songs. Delhi didn't hear any of these songs. So yes, gaane kahan baj rahe the? And how are they becoming so popular? That night I stayed up. I remember I went back to this guest house that I was staying in. It was about 250, 280 rupees a night. And I was just up the whole night, just, going on YouTube and searching for songs like these. Because when I first encountered the existence of that song, I thought शायद ये कोई एक आध गाना ऐसा बन गया है. But that night when I saw YouTube, I realized कि ये एक गाना नहीं है, ये पूरी industry ऐसी है, which is creating songs which are really sort of talking about the agenda of Hindutva, constantly trying to further it, and very often also stoking anger and fear about different people. So it can be Muslims at one point, but it can also be different groups. It can be Christians, maybe it can be Pakistan, it can be also critics of the BJP and of Prime Minister Modi. And that is what fascinated me to enter this world and sort of understand what was happening here.
And these songs are not state sponsored exactly.
No, that would not be fair to say. This is not the government of India sponsoring these songs at all. These are all independent creators. Some of them have ties with the Hindu right-wing ecosystem, and I'm not saying the party or whatever, but the larger
very loose
Hindu
ties, yeah.
Yeah. So some of them do have those ties, but mostly all of them are these independent creators who are floating. और क्या होता है when they become big is when those ties get cemented, right? When the Hindu right wing sees a benefit in associating themselves with these creators is when those ties start getting firm. But otherwise they are just independent creators trying to create music around this because this is what sells according to them.
जो मेरे को सबसे fascinating part लगा ना किताब का is I can relate to it from a YouTuber standpoint. I earlier told you कि एक टेम्पलेट है YouTube के ऊपर पॉडकास्ट ग्रो करने का, which is to do a few things, which is to do like very pro-government content,
right,
very pro-Hindu content, do mythology content, and Hindu mythology, Buddhist mythology, Jainism mythology, even like Islamic mythology. All of those things work very well. Then you do geopolitical stuff, but where India wins, right? You do army stuff, right? Interview army people. Like that's astrology, Vedic astrology, Ayurveda. Those things combined together is a winning strategy if you want to make a podcast channel grow, right? आप अपनी voice हटा दो, बस आप ये वाले interviews करो, you're going to grow. What I noticed in your book is कि one of the singers, Kavi Singh, right, is a woman.
Yeah.
उनका career इतना चल नहीं रहा था. Then उन्होंने एक trending गाना बना दिया. एक relevant moment से, जैसे YouTubers करते हैं कि यार अभी भी खबर आई है कि फलाना करिश्मा कपूर की दूसरी शादी हो गई है कुछ भी, तो उस पर एक वीडियो बना दिया, तो फिर वो ट्रेंड उठा लेता है, उनकी वीडियो चल जाती है, सब्सक्राइबर बढ़ जाते हैं, व्यूज़ आ जाते हैं, पैसे आ जाते हैं. करेक्ट?
राइट.
व्हाट इज़ द इकोनॉमिक्स ऑफ दिस सिस्टम? हाउ डू दे मैन्युफैक्चर व्यूज़? क्या ये इज इट ऑल्सो सेम और एटलीस्ट सिमिलर टू व्हाट टिपिकल यूट्यूबर्स डू?
It's actually very interesting because what happens is, as you said, कि एक formula सा बन गया है podcasting में, right? And some of India's leading podcasters are now only playing this formula out. वो आप कॉन्स्टेंटली देखोगे कि यही हो रहा है, बस ये प्रो गवर्नमेंट स्टफ हो रहा है या फिर प्रो हिंदू रिलीजन स्टफ हो रहा है, कभी कभी सुपरस्टिशन आ जाता है, कभी कभी हॉरर आ जाता है. सो देयर आर दीज टिपिकल टॉपिक्स दैट हैव कम अप in the same breath. This ecosystem that I talk of, right, of Hindutva music, has realized that Hindutva as a topic of music sells, right? So have Hindutva poets who also I've profiled in the book. इनको पता चल गया कि यार हिंदुत्व बहुत अच्छा बिकता है, right? And I remember talking to one of the channels, one of the YouTube handles which sort of publishes poetry of different kinds. उनका कवि सम्मेलन का एक YouTube channel है और वो वही बस बजाते हैं. तो I asked them, I said, भाई क्या चल रहा है? What is it that you see is generally more getting you more views and things? He said it's very clear. हिंदुत्व टॉपिक्स होती हैं जो एंटी मुस्लिम हो, कभी कभी एंटी पाकिस्तान हो, कभी कभी हाइपर नेशनलिज्म हो, और जिस चीज़ में मोदी का नाम हो वो चल जाता है साहब. वो बहुत सिंपल है. आप एंड ही देयर इज अ लाइन दैट ही टेल्स मी, ही सेड आप हर चीज़ में मोदी लगा दो साहब, वो चल जाएगा. So this is something that the creator economy in the Hindutva world has also realized, like podcasters in India have.
I'm smiling because we put like Modi in the title, it definitely works.
It works. There is, he's so polarizing a figure that the people who love him will watch it because they love him,
Yeah.
and the people who don't like him or they hate him want to watch it because they want to see why he's in it, right? So he's polarizing, and that sort of benefits both sides. In this particular case, what happens is that they've realized Hindutva sells. So some of them have, in fact, Kavi Singh, for instance, people like her have started thinking of themselves as journalists. So Kavi Singh's father tells me this fascinating anecdote from their lives when they are not doing too well, and they've got this one song which was about the Pulwama terror attack. जब terror attack होता है तो वो तुरंत वो एक गाना निकालते हैं next day, and that song goes viral, right? And that song is again sort of talking about how Pakistan is not to be blamed, but the blame lies on people who live within India, who are living amongst us, और उनको खत्म करने की जरूरत है.
Can I read the lyrics? I have it.
Yeah, please do.
दुश्मन घर में बैठे हैं, तुम कोसते रहे हो पड़ोसी को, जो छुरी बगल में रखते हैं, तुम मार दो ना उस दोषी को. इस धोखे के हमले में जो अपने को काम नहीं आता, पुलवामा में उन वीरों का ये अंजाम नहीं होता. सॉरी, इस धोखे के हमले में जो अपनों का काम नहीं होता, पुलवामा में उन वीरों का ये अंजाम नहीं होता.
Absolutely. Right. So the whole idea in that moment was ki bhai, don't blame Pakistan for this. This is people living amongst us. And who are those people? I think in the next few days, the answers were very clear because she wanted to blame Kashmiri Muslims. She wanted to blame Muslims for it. What happens is when this song came up, her popularity rose and it shot up, right? And suddenly, this was her first ever song. तो वो popularity बहुत ज़्यादा बढ़ गई उनकी, and she became extremely popular. But the next songs after that, she couldn't gain that popularity, and the next few songs were not as strident in the rhetoric. मतलब they were slightly softer.
सिर्फ देश प्रेम के गाने थे.
देश प्रेमी थी, some were about sort of the history of India, glorious ancient history, things like that. एक उन्होंने voter awareness के बारे में एक गाना किया था. So very seemingly benign, soft subjects, और वो चले नहीं गाने. When they were shooting for one of these songs, and sort of they go on these trips where they shoot videos for these songs, तब उनको एक भनक लग गई कि शायद कश्मीर में कुछ हो रहा है, because there were all of the police forces and security forces were being sent there. वहाँ पे curfew like situation हो रही थी, and this is just in the run up to 5th August 2019. जब announce हुआ, and this was introduced in the Rajya Sabha first, जब announce हुआ कि Article 370 is being abrogated, Kavi Singh and her father quickly decided that they needed a song about this right then, right there. Because unki thought ye thi ki we are not creators anymore, we are like journalists. So we have to respond to everything that happens, and we have to come up with something to respond to a news event. And the reason behind this also, Vinamra, is very interesting, because there's enough data now to show, and there's studies being done on this, which show that Indians are now using YouTube as their Google search. तो हम पहले गूगल सर्च करते थे कि कुछ हुआ है क्या नहीं. आज पब्लिक सब यूट्यूब पे जा रही है, एंड पीपल आर सेइंग ओके, आई वांट टू सर्च ऑन यूट्यूब व्हाट इज द रिस्पॉन्स टू व्हाट हैज हैपेंड.
राइट.
अगर कुछ हुआ है, एज यू सेड, अगर करिश्मा कपूर की दूसरी शादी हुई है, तो आई एम गोइंग टू गो ऑन यूट्यूब एंड लुक फॉर हिम. who's the groom, who's done this, who's all of that. तो यही था, and this is why Kavi and her father realized that in that moment, when people go onto YouTube to look for news or updates about Article 370 being abrogated, उनका गाना सबसे पहले आना चाहिए. So within the night, so this is on the 5th of August, वो रात को जाते हैं, गाना रिकॉर्ड करते हैं, गाना शूट करते हैं, पूरी रात एडिट करते हैं, और अगली सुबह को वो गाना रेडी होकर YouTube पे चला जाता है.
And it tracks millions of views?
It tracks millions of views. It's one of the most popular songs that she's done. And that has reinforced to her and the economy that if you're there at the right point, at the right time, then you will get the views. Because people are looking for that content right then. They told me कि अगर यही गाना 3 दिन बाद आता या 2 दिन बाद आता, तो this song would have had no relevance. Because the song was relevant because people wanted to know more about it. और उनका गाना क्या था? उनका गाना was basically characterizing the whole move to be, sort of breaking the shackles of slavery from Kashmir. और उसकी वो गाने में एक लाइन थी कि अब कश्मीर की घाटी में जय श्री राम के नारे गूंजेंगे. Right, so it's a very clear Hindutva sort of spin on the decision, and it tells the viewer कि this is the perspective you must have, and that is what is important, because क्या होता है in the moment a lot of the perspectives are lost. People don't know कि इसको अच्छे मतलब how do you see this?
They want to frame reality.
They want to frame an opinion more
Yeah.
than reality. They want to say कि अच्छा how do I feel about this? ये अच्छा है या बुरा है? So when the Hindutva economy inserts itself in and says कि अब कश्मीर की घाटी में जय श्री राम के नारे गूंजेंगे, the guy who's sitting and listening to Kavi Singh says, okay, so this is what it is. Now I like the decision. Right? So leave the facts aside, leave what is happening aside, leave the manner in which the decision was made, where you've put thousands of people under house arrest, you've clamped curfew, you've jailed all the opposition leaders, you've dissolved the assembly. ये सारा एक साइड चला गया, पर अब कश्मीर के घाटी में जय श्री राम के नारे गूंजेंगे is the only thing I need to know.
Yeah, I think the polarizing flavor was disturbing. I mean, the decision was controversial as well. But I think no one can argue that कश्मीर को इंडिया के साथ आना ही था. That letting that state on its own, that would just have been like trouble for the country overall. To find that उसके ऊपर एक extra flavor लगाया, तड़का लगाया, that is the issue. I think you would know this when journalism turns into sensationalism, and when there are no pedigree journalists but just singers trying to become famous or content creators or YouTubers trying to become famous. आप लोगों के अंदर फिर भी थोड़ी बहुत जर्नलिस्टिक रूल्स आप फॉलो करते हो, राइट? आई थिंक विद दिस न्यू सिटीजन जर्नलिज्म कंटेंट क्रिएटर स्पेस देयर आर नो रूल्स.
There are no rules at all. And an opinion is very easily mixed into facts. Facts are not sacrosanct at all anymore. Opinions are what matters, because I think the economy now, the social media economy, is such that you have to be in either of the two camps. Right? अगर आप लेफ्ट विंग कैंप में हो तो आपको बस उन्हीं लोगों को अट्रैक्ट करना है, और वो लोग कब अट्रैक्ट होंगे when you keep criticizing or abusing the right wing. And similar is the case with the right wing, right? You will be able to attract people more and more only when you're constantly stoking sort of fear and anger about the right wing's enemies. It could be liberals, it could be Pakistan, it could be Muslims, पर आपको constantly reiterate करते रहना है, because fear sells, right? So in some ways both sides are guilty of this, but at this point I would say that India's social media economy is so much more dominated by the right wing. The left wing might be doing things on its own, but I think it's mostly dominated by the right wing. I think there's no denying that.
Agreed. What I found also fascinating was, यार इनके जो पापा हैं कवि सिंह के, ये हट जाओ ताऊ इन्होंने लिखा है,
इनका गाना है.
मैं तो when I was reading that I was so surprised, because I remember I had this friend of mine, वो जैतपुर मोलारबंद विलेज है यहाँ नोएडा के एरिया के अंदर ही है,
right?
फैजाबाद में just when you cross the river, यहाँ पे एक नहर आता है.
Right.
It's the same nehar that becomes like a bigger thing when you go to Noida, right? The sort of, I guess a river, something that separates Delhi and Yamuna bhi ban jati hai kuch. I'm not sure. The details are muddy because it's a while ago. But he used to live there.
I think so is the river.
And he brought these pirated CDs to me. जो वहाँ पे relevant गाने चल रहे थे उस टाइम. Pirated CDs का ज़माना था. People would watch lots of like pirated movies and like वो MP3 20-30 भर के नई लेटेस्ट पिक्चरों के, you would get it and you would put it in your car and you would listen to the songs. So there was this new CD that had come out called नया लिफाफा. नया लिफाफा का जो first song था ना, वो हट जाता हूँ पाछे ने था. And I saw that song at its inception जब वो just Delhi NCR में घुस रहा था, and I'm sure वो आया कहीं और hinterland से होगा और दूर से. Then 5-6 years later it became cool and memes में भी आना शुरू हो गया, and Bollywood ने भी थोड़ा बहुत co-opt करा, and I think you told me कि वो eventually किसी picture के अंदर भी आ गया. You read it in the book.
Yes,
right?
yes, it's also in a Hindi film.
Yeah. So I was very fascinated because it was the first time. I always knew that Punjabi industry had a better permeation in the Hindi film industry or the Hindi music industry, right? Like as a youth living here in this part of the world, I would listen to far more Punjabi music from Punjab than I would listen to Delhi NCR se bana hua organic native music. Then Haryanvi music also started to come in. So this was the first song that sort of broke Haryanvi music into the mainstream. Then a few other songs. I had no idea this would be the same man who would come to give rise to a Hindutva pop star. Never in my wildest dreams did I imagine.
I mean, he's a fascinating guy, right? He's Ramkesh Jivanpurwala is a widely respected figure in the Haryanvi music industry. He has made a career out of singing songs which are very, very rooted in Haryanvi culture. There are songs which offer you spiritual advice. There are songs which offer you a sort of path of moral clarity. कि आपको ज़िंदगी में कैसा बनना है, आपको क्या करना है. That is the kind of space that he, as Ramkesh, the singer, occupies. And then he's gone on to do various other things. I mean, I'm amazed at the number of things that he's able to do. वो गाने लिखते भी हैं, वो गाने गाते भी हैं, वो सिंगिंग भी करते हैं, मतलब वो एक्टिंग भी करते हैं, वो डायरेक्शन भी करते हैं, वो प्रोडक्शन भी करते हैं. And then amongst all of this, one of the other things that he did was he also mentored Kavi Singh, who is his daughter, to become a pop star. That the genesis of how that happened is also very interesting, because here's this guy who's at the top of the industry in so many ways, in the Haryanvi music industry, and he has in the family, he has no other singer who's performing, या फिर कोई और नहीं है जो इंडस्ट्री में है. And he starts believing that Kavi Singh can be the person who can then take the legacy forward, who can be the singer who can actually take away some of the sort of limelight that he gets. So he starts actively mentoring her, and him and Kavi's husband, and then husband at least, they start thinking कि इसको कैसे करें, how do we plan this? So it's a very interesting way where they were planning Kavi Singh's profile, कि उनका प्रोफाइल कैसा होना चाहिए. And this is much before Kavi even sang a song.
And is Kavi still active on Instagram, YouTube right now?
Yeah, Kavi is very much active on all of these platforms. She's now started singing again. She's sort of performing again. She just recently wrote a song saying 2024 में मोदी को फिर से लाना है, कमल खिलाना है, right? So she's active again, and she's on the thing again. And I think it's Ramkesh's own background as a singer that has enabled Kavi to also get so far in such a short time. I mean, उन्होंने पहला गाना अपना 2019 में गाया था, right after Pulwama, as I told you. And by now, I mean, this is just 5 years now, she's sung over 80-90 songs, and she's one of the most popular artists in this category of Hindutva pop.
और इन लोगों को पता है किताब आ गई है?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah.
They're okay with it.
I mean, so Kavi's, I think, still reading it. Kamal has read the book, and he's okay. I mean, I think they're very mature about the fact that this was not supposed to be an advertisement for them. I have been sincere enough, Vinamra, to tell them that, dekho, I want to highlight what you're doing to a world that doesn't know of your existence. I think one of the problems in our country right now is that we're so polarized, we're not able to look beyond our own echo chambers, right?
Correct.
हम बस अपने ही लोगों में बैठे हैं, we're just listening to the same thing, we're reading the same thing. We're not able to understand that there is a world beyond ours. And because we don't like a certain ideology, we will not engage with it. The thing that I keep telling people is this, that Hindutva now is the most dominant political ideology of the day, right? We've got the BJP, which has ruled for 10 years already. It might rule for 5 more or 10 more, who knows? But nonetheless, Hindutva as an ideology is not going away. Even if the BJP loses in 24, right? Let's assume that it does. Even if it does, the ideology is not going to suddenly go back, because I think ये 10 सालों में ऐसा हुआ है कि the Hindu identity has become a very, very strong part of the discourse, not just politically, but as the book shows you, even culturally and socially. तो वो Hindu identity को आप suddenly आप नहीं कह सकते कि नहीं ये सब खत्म हो गया है, BJP is lost, now that is not going to happen. So the more we engage and the more we understand what is driving people to accept Hindutva, to normalize it, to popularize it, I think the better engaged we will be, and the better we will be able to understand what is happening in the country.
Some of the critics of the left often say that this is a response to how the Abrahamic faiths have always been polarized, how they've always consolidated their political identities, how they've always maintained कि यार हमें this is who we are, this is what we stand for. Many of them on the right say this was a long time coming, and there should be a case where Hindus should in a lot of ways understand their place in the world and actively assert it and proudly, right? I agree with that. My problem is, at what point does pride become malice? वो आपको पता नहीं चलता है, right? अभी आपने ये किस्सा सुना है हिंटरलैंड से. कोई एक thinking rational person एक casual incident of like a casual incident of communalism मुंह से कुछ उल्टा सीधा बोल देना मुस्लिमों के लिए ऐसे कर देगा, but then still go about their day. They live in a metro city. But when you're living in close clusters in villages and आप ऐसे indoctrinate हो रहे हो, the chances for what you would do increase like by a lot. So what do you think is the alternative to a Hindutva world, because we're clearly living in it?
I think it's interesting what you say about the sense of Hindu pride vis-a-vis other religions, and this sort of feeling that this was was a long time coming. I think the beautiful thing about Hinduism, and I'm born into a Hindu family. Hinduism has been an integral part of my life since my childhood. The beautiful part about Hinduism that it was accommodating, right? It could accommodate you if you went to a temple. It would accommodate you even if you didn't go to a temple. It could accommodate you if you sang the Gayatri Mantra. It would also accommodate you if you didn't.
Correct.
Right? You could be confused. You could not be someone who's overtly religious, and you could still find a place in the Hindu religion. No one would say, नहीं आपको ये करना ही है, अगर ये नहीं किया तो आप हिंदू नहीं हो. That was the beauty of Hinduism as it existed. Unfortunately, I think we've started conflating Hindu pride with Hindutva pride, right? Hindu pride can mean that you take pride in your religion. You can take pride in its rich cultural legacy, in everything that Hinduism stands for. But it can't mean the exclusion of others. It can't mean that, it can't mean the sense of supremacy in which you are constantly looking down on fellow citizens just because they don't belong to the same religion. I think that is something that we've started conflating. I think Hindu pride doesn't have to necessarily mean a xenophobic, Islamophobic sort of characterization. And I think that is insulting to the religion. The religion doesn't stand for that. The religion doesn't stand for you saying कि आप अगर Muslim हो या Christian हो तो आप हमसे नीचे हो. Right? That is not what the religion at all stands for. Having said that, I think what we're seeing is that this kind of popular culture that exists is very successful in conflating the two. वो आपको ये बताना चाहता है कि जब तक आप मुसलमान से नफरत नहीं करोगे तब तक आप अच्छे हिंदू नहीं हो. Right? And that is the problem. That is the problem because that is the way to radicalization. That is the way to slow, normal radicalization and polarization towards people who are around you. तो वो आज हो रहा है. इसका alternative क्या होगा? इसका alternative मेरे जहन में is going back to the good old values of Hinduism like it existed till say 10-12 years ago. Right? Where we could respect every other religion and yet we could have our own space to do what we wanted to. I think that was the counter to it. The counter exists. Counter को पैदा करने की ज़रूरत नहीं है because this is not who we are inherently. Right? You said that this has been a while coming because for 70 odd years of our country's existence as a post-colonial state, as an independent state, हम ऐसे नहीं थे. Yes, there were instances where where communal rights have broken out. There have been instances where we fought within the country between different religions. But inherently, we were not people who excluded each other or who went around shooting or killing each other because they belonged to the other religion.
Right.
आज वो हो रहा है. आज individuals are feeling emboldened enough to say कि अगर तू मुसलमान है तो मैं तुझे मारूंगा. He doesn't have to belong to a Bajrang Dal. He doesn't have to belong to a VHP. आपने जैसे देखा होगा हमारे मुंबई की एक ये घटना है where an RPF constable,
I saw that. Yeah.
right, has a dispute with his senior. उसको छुट्टी चाहिए, छुट्टी नहीं मिलती, has a dispute, he kills the senior. What does he do next? He takes the rifle, he takes the automatic weapon that he has, he goes and walks around the railway bogie and he looks at Muslims कि कौन मुस्लिम दिख रहा है, अच्छा इसके पास इसकी दाढ़ी है, इसको निकालते हैं. And he shoots in cold-blooded moments. He kills all of those Muslims that he can spot. And then he goes on to lecture people about how Modi and Yogi are the people who are going to save the country. This is not what we had seen so far. And this is the problem now. This polarization has led to people like him believing that the only way that Hindus can exist is by killing Muslims. And that is not what Hinduism stands for.
On the other side, people feel like you've also mentioned, that all of this is the subtext for most of this music is the subtext for most music in this genre is clear. Hindus are under attack. Hindus need to fight back and hit back hard at enemies within and outside the country's borders. As a result, the genre constantly creates enemies, demonizes them, and asks the listeners to join in the project of retribution, right? Now, I've spoken to several people on the right. They say that indeed, Hindus are treated like 8th-class citizens. I've spoken to Anand Ranganathan, who says that a lot, right? I've also spoken to people who say that ki if there is a secret conspiracy for Muslims in the country to eventually take over, that's why they're breeding and having so many babies, right? तो हम खतरे में हैं, हमारे को अपने आप को प्रोटेक्ट करना है क्योंकि हम मार्शल रिलीजन नहीं है और we are not a political religion. These are the necessary measures we take. I'm not saying कि इसका मतलब ये है कि this condones killing or hate crime of any sorts, but a protective tribal instinct has begun to rise because of this. Now, you mentioned both of these things in the book. What do you say about that?
I think a lot of this is imagined, right? A lot of this fear mongering is imagined. I mean, it might emanate from a sense of grievance, जैसे आपने कहा, a historical sense of grievance, because maybe they felt wronged at the secular project that a post-independence India was trying to create. Maybe there were some people who said, no, we don't like this. Why should the 80% feel like we're equal to the 20%? तो शायद वो grievance होगी उनको. लेकिन for you to take that grievance and then concoct conspiracies about how there is an Islamic conspiracy कि बस हम हिंदू लड़कियों को उठाएंगे, उनको शादी करवाएंगे, we'll convert them into Islam and that is how we are going to grow. I mean, or sort of believe that बस Muslims have secretly been conspiring कि बस हम सबको बच्चे पैदा करने हैं और हम एक दिन हिंदू से ज़्यादा हो जाएंगे.
Yeah, can you mention I think there's a funny thing at the end of these songs where ये बोलते हैं ना कि सैफ अली खान और आमिर खान हिंदू लड़कियों के साथ शादी करते हैं फिर उन्हें छोड़ देते हैं, something to that effect.
Yeah. So this is again, I mean, the conspiracy is constantly reiterated in some of this pop culture, right? उसका एक fundamental point ये है, ये pop culture का, हिंदुत्व pop culture. So be it music, be it poetry, be it books, is that you constantly keep reiterating कि देखो भाई खतरे में हम लोग, So then how खतरे में कैसे हैं हम लोग? तो बताएंगे देखो इन्होंने शादी कर ली हिंदू लड़की से, मुसलमान ने शादी कर ली हिंदू लड़की से. खतरे में कैसे हैं हम लोग? फिर वो दूसरा एग्जाम्पल देंगे कि देखो ये हमारी गाय काट रहे हैं लोग, है ना. खतरे में कैसे हैं हम लोग? वो ऐसे कर करके तीन चार पांच एग्जाम्पल दे देंगे आपको. जैसे मैं आपको एक एग्जाम्पल देता हूँ, जैसे what we are seeing in Israel and Gaza, right? For instance, when we saw October 7th, the attacks by Hamas on Israel, in the right-wing space, and I've reported on this for The Wire, in the right-wing space, उसका रिएक्शन क्या निकलता है कि देखो गाज़ा में ऐसा हो रहा है, Hamas is attacking Israel. Israel was trying to do everything it could for Gaza, and फिर भी look at these Muslims and look how they've turned around and turned against Israelis and attacked them. This is exactly what is going to happen to Hindus here. क्योंकि वहाँ तो एक गाज़ा था लेकिन यहाँ तो हज़ारों गाज़ा है. This is the way that fear is repackaged in the Indian context without any basis at all. What is the basis for saying that हमारे यहाँ हज़ारों गाज़ा है? There is no basis at all. But the problem is rhetoric and fear and hate don't need logic. They don't need sense. They don't need facts. Right? They need pure and pure emotion. आपको अगर emotion पे ही काम करना है तो you can say whatever you want. And you can keep repeating it. And then it becomes the truth. You can say it so many times that people say, okay, अगर इतनी बार बंदा बोल रहा है तो शायद सच होगा. And that is exactly the case with so many of these imagined conspiracies. And in my book, and I don't want to say much more because I want people to read this, in my book I specifically debunk this whole myth about how the Muslim population is growing so much that it's going to take over the Hindu population.
Yeah, you have the stats for it.
I have the stats for it, right? So I've gone deep into it and I've said this is actually not based on any factual information. And the source of the information is the government of India. So when you go deep down and when you ask for facts is when they will point to conflated, they will point to isolated instances कि वहाँ वो हरियाणा में वो एक इंसिडेंट हो गया, महाराष्ट्र में एक इंसिडेंट हो गया. And apparently in a country of 1.4 billion people, 5 examples are enough to make a pattern out of it and then to stoke fear and hatred out of it. That is the problem here.
I see. Yeah. One of the problems which emerges in the Hindu right, I don't even know what the word Hindutva really means. I haven't really delved into it. Is that there is at the core of it, there is no expansion project in the Hindu religion, right? There is no there's no need to expand really and convert other people to being a Hindu. That is not something that you can do technically, right? You just adopt the ways of life of a Hindu. जैसे मैं बाहर से कोई गोरा आता हूँ and I want to find the meaning of life. I go to Rishikesh and I'm like, नहीं, 600-hour yoga training and I'm like, okay, wow, I'm a yogini now, whatever it is, right? So you can casually sort of slide into the religion. But Abrahamic faiths have an expansion project at the center, right? And I think some of the fears of being under attack comes from that, which is what the right often says. How valid is that?
No, fair enough. I think what we've seen in the past is that both of these religions, right, be it Islam, be it Christianity, have projects which are, essentially the project is to expand the religion, is to expand the number of people, get more people in the fold. And we've seen that. Conversions as such are not illegal in the country yet, right? We still have the choice to select and elect the religion that we like. And then if it's constitutional, you can't really blame one religion for doing it and say that the other religion is not doing it and it's wrong.
That's a fair point.
Right?
Yeah.
Constitutionally, you have the right. Constitutionally, we have the right to preach our religion as well. So that right remains with these religions if they are doing that. And there are enough examples to show कि वो कर रहे हैं, right? The response can be there, right? The response can be कि अगर ये कर रहे हैं तो why are they doing it? In my sense, a more logical response to that would be to interrogate and reflect on why that is happening. If there are people who are leaving the Hindu religion, like with Baba Sahib Ambedkar, right? When people chose to leave the Hindu religion and embrace Buddhism, what was the reaction, right? I mean, what was the need for it? The need was that they were suppressed by the caste system. Similarly, if that is happening now, if other religions are chipping away, if you want to say that, if they're chipping away at the Hindu population and taking them into their fold, what are the reasons driving that?
What can Hindus do better to make sure
I think a more logical response to it should have been कि क्या कर सकते हैं हम? How can we stop this? Can it be that you go and ransack churches and beat up pastors and sort of claim that there is a global conspiracy against you? I don't think that's a logical response. मतलब फिर आप वो at the local level you're becoming a hero by sort of going and smashing a church or a mosque. But then how are you addressing the larger issue? So my problem is this, that I think the right-wing intellectuals, and you've named some of them, if they are constantly reiterating this whole rhetoric कि Hindu खतरे में है because religions are converting our people and stuff, I think they're doing a great service. They're doing a great disservice to followers of Hindutva, especially because they appeal to the Hindutva brand, by not pointing out to the real problems that remain, if there are problems, right? If the problem is the caste system, for instance, and if you're not pointing to the caste system as a problem and only blaming another religion for taking people away from it, then that is a problem. I think that is a great disservice to the religion and to followers of Hindutva, who will be offended that Christianity के missionaries आके हमारे लोग ले जा रहे हैं. But then see why that is happening. I think a more honest reflection is what is needed, and I think that is missing. Because it's easier to blame an enemy. It's easy, as I say in the book, it's easier to create an enemy and then constantly blame them rather than put your own house in order. And I see that somewhere in that intellectual space as well, in the right wing.
You mentioned Kavi Sammelans also. And Kavi Sammelans, typically in my generation, I would call myself a member of the Gen Z, aren't as popular because this is a very old world tradition that is, now dying down. Although I think Bhojpuri funny Kavi Sammelans ke kuch lines jo aati hain, mostly explicit, those make their way to the Instagram feeds as memes. But generally Kavi Sammelans don't make it to our feeds. That's how we consume our information. What I found fascinating in your reference to Kavi Sammelans is that pehle politicians could sit in the Kavi Sammelans and also be made fun of because it was good for their brand to be associated with a firebrand poet, right? And they would take their jokes. You said increasingly as politicians became more and more sensitive, the Kavi Sammelans could not be as, let's just say, edgy in their material, and they would have to tone it down. And eventually, फिर वही होता है कि it's the patron and the artist. You're making a portrait of the king as opposed to a caricature of the king, right? Which is, I guess, the role of an artist or even the role of a gesture. So what have you noticed about the Kavi Sammelan ecosystem as a consequence of reading or researching your book?
I think it's interesting you say that it's a dying phenomena because, I mean, people who live in say urban cities like you, like I think we should be forgiven to think that ये नहीं हो रहा है. मतलब, it's not a popular form of entertainment at all. But I was surprised, as you would be, when you actually go down that space and see what is happening. I mean, see the number of Kavi Sammelans that are still happening. see the number of people who come to see some of these Sammelans, right? And if you see the online consumption of Kavi Sammelans, you will be surprised at the number of people who are watching it and actively liking it. So that space is still remaining. It's not going down without a fight. That space is possibly growing as well because of social media. Because पहले क्या होता था, आप if you go to a Kavi Sammelan, you're able to talk to, say, anywhere between a few hundreds to a few thousands, right? Now the same Kavi Sammelan is now being put on YouTube and getting 5 million views. So the reach has actually dramatically increased. Maybe what we're not seeing is the number of Kavi Sammelans around us in urban spaces.
Yeah.
Right?
Delhi just has one, Jashn-e Ekta, that happens.
Yes. And then there are a bunch of, like in Delhi, the Delhi government sponsors one, which happens at the Red Fort, which is one of the most...
What is it called?
One of the most prominent Kavi Sammelans. I don't remember what it's called. But
Jashn-e Ekta hi
No, Jashn-e Ekta nahi. This is the official... Jashn-e Ekta is a private enterprise. But ये government का होता है. And it's the biggest honor for a poet in India because आप रेड फोर्ट पे परफॉर्म करते हो.
Crazy.
Right? So कवियों की दुनिया में कहते हैं कि एक प्रधानमंत्री होता है जो रेड फोर्ट से भाषण दे सकता है और दूसरा होता है कवि जो रेड फोर्ट पे जाके वो कविता सुना सकता है. So that is still happening. Right? We're not seeing as many in the urban spaces, but in the rural, in the semi-rural, in the semi-urban, Kavi Sammelans are still a decently popular form of entertainment where a lot of the organizers still want to have a Kavi Sammelan to finish off a longer event. जैसे मैं जाता था 8-10 दिन का कोई अगर आपका फेस्टिवल हो या कोई इवेंट हो, कोई दशहरा भी हो गया, नवरात्रि भी हो गई, कभी कभी कोई और कल्चरल इवेंट होता है. So the finale is the Kavi Sammelan, right? Because then you're able to call Kavis from different parts of the country and then have them perform in front of the crowd. तो वो अभी भी है. What you're saying is very relevant, and Kumar Vishvas says this. उन्होंने एक story बोली थी कि Jawaharlal Nehru was in the audience, and then there was a shire, and I forget the name of the shire. तो उनको perform वहाँ करना था, लेकिन उन्होंने कहा नेहरू साहब सुन नहीं पाएंगे मेरी बात. And Indira Gandhi goes and convinces him कि you say what you want to say, and Nehru will be able to bear it. Right? And then he goes and performs and he makes some very stinging remarks against Nehru. And Nehru is sitting in the audience smiling. So this is a story that Kumar Vishwas often narrates to talk about how large-hearted Nehru was as a leader as against what we see now, where criticism तो छोड़ो, आप एक interview भी unscripted नहीं कर पाते हो. तो वो ज़माना था जब politicians were able to patronize these arts at their own expense. Right? कि चलो ठीक है मैं आपको I will support you even if you have to make fun of me, I will be there. But I think the intolerance within the political class for criticism, be it in the way that they've shut down the media, right? And by shut down I mean by shut down by sort of not allowing them to investigate, not allowing them to question you. जैसे परसों की एक वीडियो वायरल हुई when all of these MPs were suspended. And I think ENI or someone asked Hema Malini कि क्यों सस्पेंड हुए, तो she said वो बहुत सवाल पूछ रहे थे तो फिर सस्पेंड करना पड़ा उनको. So that is the essence, right? If you ask too many questions or if you make scathing criticism, then that is not tolerated anymore. तो कवि सम्मेलन भी unfortunately ये हुआ है, where typically what used to happen is a कवि सम्मेलन would always have different genres. So there will be the Veer Ras, so there will be poems of bravery, nationalism, patriotism, etc. But there will be also the Shringar, which is the more romantic stuff. And there will be Hasya, which is the more comical, right? तो वो एक पूरा पैकेज होता था. आपको एक शाम में आपको अलग अलग इमोशन आपको मिल जाते थे through different poets. Typically the Hasya would have to revolve around the chief patron who's sitting right there. मतलब उन पे 2-3 जोक तो बनते ही थे कि आप आए हैं, आप उनके बारे में जोक करेंगे, या फिर अगर समझ लो एसपी ने स्पॉन्सर किया तो एसपी के बारे में, पुलिस के बारे में करेंगे. But that, unfortunately, that culture has gone away, where we are able to laugh at authority or where the authority is able to laugh at themselves. As a result of which, politicians have found it increasingly difficult to support such Kavi Sammelans because they're saying, यार इनको मैं बुला तो लूँगा, आके मेरे पे ही जोक मार देंगे तो मेरी constituency क्या कहेगी? I am not the bahubali फिर. उनको लगेगा अरे ये तो strong man है और उन पे जोक मार रहे हैं. So I think that whole romanticization of the strong man जो आज हमारे political culture में बहुत dominant है, कि कोई भी अगर पॉलिटिकल लीडर हो तो वो स्ट्रॉन्ग मैन होना चाहिए. वो स्ट्रॉन्ग मैन का प्रॉब्लम ये है साहब कि फिर वो आप हंस नहीं सकते आप. ही विल ऑल्सो नॉट लाफ एट हिमसेल्फ एंड यू विल ऑल्सो नॉट बी एबल टू लाफ एट हिम. अगर आप करोगे तो आप पे शायद UAPA, सेडिशन या कुछ और लग जाए.
Yeah, when you were saying that, a music video for नायक जो वो है अनिल कपूर की पिक्चर जिसमें वो कीचड़ से निकल के आ रहा था और पीछे ट्यूशन रहती है I think because there is also this very funny phenomenon that has emerged, which is, if you want to basically run your Instagram or Facebook page, very popular fan edits people can make of you if you're a politician. आप किसी इवेंट पे आ रहे हो और आपके साथ 4-5 आपके चेले हैं, छोटे छोटे युवा नेता हैं जो भरना चाहते हैं और जो वहाँ के ऑर्गेनाइज़र हैं, तो आप जाओ और पीछे आराम में प्रचंड चला दो या कोई और रेलिवेंट लोकल गाना चला दो, तो आपकी छवि और बड़ी दिख जाती है कि आप बहुत बड़े योद्धा लग रहे हो. समटाइम्स लाइक आई वॉच दोस एंड आई एम लाइक यार ये मेरा भी करने का मन है बिकॉज इट्स सो कूल. बट it's funny how through the internet what is considered harmless can then become an entirely, like it becomes an approach where the internet is now informing what you do with your populace, with your stakeholders, how you're presented, not the other way around, where you're saying this is our strategy. You're saying the internet loves this, let's do more of this. The internet loves that I am some UP ka don who's also a politician और मेरे को और बड़ा दिखाया जा रहा है, तो let's do that. Let's not show me in my comical best. And one example that I often think of is when I was a kid, I would watch Gustaki Maaf, the funny puppet show. और वहाँ पे सारे बड़े नेताओं के कठपुतलियाँ होती थी और उन पे हंसी मजाक चलता रहता था. ठीक है, that kind of thing has died down.
We used to have this show called Movers and Shakers. I don't know if you remember this.
I know the name. It rings a bell.
So Shekhar Suman used to host the show, and
Okay.
it was like one of those sort of American late night talk shows जो होते थे, where a stand-up comic is typically the host, and he sort of roasts politicians and everyone, and then he'll have a guest at the end of it. तो guest के साथ थोड़ी बातें, but there'll be stand-up. And Shekhar Suman used to do it, and I remember growing up and watching that in the night, and I think वो 10 बजे वगैरह कुछ आता था वो. He would mimic almost every top politician in the country at that point. Right?
Where is he now?
I don't know, right? I mean, so he would do this. He would talk about, he would mimic Atal Bihari Vajpayee, he would mimic Lalu Prasad Yadav, he would mimic Mayawati, Sonia Gandhi, everything. I mean, I don't think there was any politician who he would spare. And if you just think of it, can that show exist now?
Nope, no chance.
Right? Can someone go onto television and mimic the Prime Minister, the Home Minister, Rahul Gandhi? Yes, you can still mimic, right? And you'd be rewarded for that. But can someone mimic some of these strong men that I told you about? I think the answer is a categorical no. I think the answer is no chance in hell. It's not even a no. And I think that tells you a lot about the changing culture of our country as well, as to just how open we are to be able to criticize our leaders, to be able to poke fun at them, and for them to be able to laugh at themselves.
Yeah.
I think that culture has changed immensely now.
I believe whoever is the president of Syria now, his dad, or one of his Egyptian counterparts. I was in this class called History of the Modern Middle East in college, and we were discussing the role of comedy and किस तरह के symbols use करते हैं to assert dominance. Leaders typically करते हैं ना, because right now we're in the era of strongman leaders across the world, right? By the way,
Across the world, absolutely. Yeah.
है ना?
Yeah.
And the few who are not strongman leaders are vilified and pointed out कि ये नहीं है,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
So one typical mention from that time is a comedian saying there was a law in which whatever you said, even in your private room, you had to assume that the president was watching. So if I would say, Kunal and dear president, मतलब आपको हर बार ये assume करना है कि president देख रहा है, तो आप उसको भी address करो. So the comedian made a joke. He put an empty chair, like यहाँ president बैठे हैं, and he would say a few jokes and then say, sir आपको भी बता देता हूँ मैं इस तरह से. And it's just the kind of permeation of Narendra Modi that we see in our lives now, where, I mean, I don't know too much about the bills that have come out right now, but I'm assuming it puts people like me also under the radar. Do you know something about that?
I mean, it does. I think individual creators on the internet, and you could be a YouTuber, but you could also be a person who's tweeting. All of us will fall under the purview of the new bills that have come.
The telecommunications bill and
and the broadcast bill.
Okay.
Right. So both of them. I mean, one has to go through details in sort of a finer form, but mota moti is the case is that you can both be hauled up for what you say or what you do or what you tweet. You can be putting out a video and you'd still be sort of hauled up for it. So I think we're seeing a greater amount of surveillance against individual voices and creators. I mean, I think YouTube had emerged as a space where you didn't have censorship. So you could do your own thing. You could be a right winger, you could be a left winger, you could still manage. And apart from the occasional sort of politics from YouTube, where वो किसी channel को suppress कर देती थी, किसी को बढ़ा देती थी. Of course, the sort of the opaqueness of it all means that we don't really know much about how it does it. पर वो होता था, लेकिन beyond the point वो नहीं होता था. The government was not able to do as much. Now we're seeing that the government is eyeing that space, right? Because it realizes that television channels और studios तो खाली हो गए. अब जो बैठे हैं वहाँ वो गवर्नमेंट के दर्शन करते रहते हैं, right? All that they do is basically praise the government in and out, call the prime minister a god and call him different names and worship him in different ways. तो अब वो जो लोग जो नहीं कर पाते वो कहाँ जा रहे हैं? The answer is they're going to YouTube, because YouTube is still offering the reach. So a very logical next step in the government's agenda, as I see, it has to be the control of YouTube. Has to be able to show you that even on YouTube you will not be free of consequences. अगर वहाँ पे एंटी गवर्नमेंट क्रिटिसिज्म हो रहा है या फिर वो रेटरिक हो रहा है तो हमारी नज़र वहाँ पे भी है. So I mean, who knows?
Yeah, no, I've always thought of the internet as a government, agnostic, a whatever of everything, right? The internet, मेरे को हमेशा से it's been a paradise in the sense of the freedom it still gives you. Even now, where the best comedians in the country skirt around massive corners to not get legal cases against them. YouTubers don't say the things they always want to say. Even in the slightly restricted form of free speech that we're able to practice on these platforms, हमारे को बहुत छूट है. And in platforms पे आप अपने दिल की बात कह सकते हो. In whatever way or extent the constitution has dubious laws around free speech, it's not really clearly defined. We're still able to practice saying what we think, right? And even like look stupid in the attempt to understand the world better. I think if there is a regulation around this, I don't know where we will go. Private Telegram channels, because this is still in a lot of ways like the public sphere. Twitter is the public sphere, right? जहाँ पे आप जाके लोगों से बात कर सकते हो, you can see opinions. If those are coming under the radar, I don't know where people will find respite.
But Vinamra, this has been happening for a while. Let me take you back to the farmers' protest, जब हो रहा था. And when people were tweeting about the farmers' protest, right? There were hashtags and there were tweets which were critical of the government in support of the farmers. The government of India presented a whole list of tweets, right? जब आपके farmer रो रहे हैं या वो protest कर रहे हैं, वो दिल्ली आना चाहते हैं, आप आने नहीं दे रहे. Your priority at that point as the government of the day was to bring out a list of tweets, take it to Twitter and say इनको ban कर दीजिए आप, इनको ये tweet को block कर दीजिए आप. Take these tweets down, at least in India, or keep these accounts on hold, at least in India. When Twitter refused to do this, and all of this is public record, when Twitter refused to do it, the government of India threatened to jail executives for not following government orders. And then we've seen legislation which does exactly that, which legislates that if social media platforms don't follow government orders, they will be liable for persecution in India. So there is that aspect, right? The YouTube aspect now has also been weaponized, because if you remember in the past, there have been so many instances where, as you said, stand-up comics, for instance, right, have posted videos of their stand-up specials, stuff that they may not be able to say it in a live audience, or maybe they would. They've posted it on YouTube thinking
they say
it's free.
far more on a live audience because they know they're not being recorded.
Right.
Yeah.
And they've posted it on YouTube, and clips of them have been edited out and then circulated on WhatsApp and then on Twitter and Facebook, and mobs have reached their homes, or mobs have given them rape and death threats. So we've already seen that the internet has been, extremely politicized and weaponized also in so many ways. So I think that trend has been happening for a while. I mean, this is of course a far sort of stronger step in that direction, but we've seen that trend taking place and shaping up for a while now.
Right. Tell me more about doing research for this book. 5 साल लगे इसको लिखने में, in total 5 years?
I started in 2019, yes. So, I mean, 4 साल, because I submitted the manuscript in August this year.
And I know that you write for several foreign publications as well, right? So, typically you're an investigative journalist by training, or is this something you acquired as a consequence of doing the research?
I think in India, honestly, no one is an investigative journalist by training. वो थोड़ी सी एक myth है journalism के बारे में.
अच्छा.
क्योंकि as a journalist, you're trained to do various things, right? You're trained to be able to write better. You're trained to be able to investigate. So it's one of the skills that you acquire. It's your work that makes you an investigative journalist. But eventually, क्योंकि आप इतनी सारी investigations करते हो that you focus only on those. Similarly, आप इतने सारे features लिखोगे that you become a feature writer, right? So typically in India as well, and the way journalism shapes up, I've done various kinds of reporting. I've done a lot of political reporting though. I've covered the government in Maharashtra. I've covered the government in Mumbai, the BMC. I've covered political parties. I've covered issues like hate crimes and things.
यार BMC में कितने पैसे कैसे हैं?
बहुत ज़्यादा पैसे हैं.
ये मतलब बिकॉज मुंबई बहुत फाइनेंशियल कैपिटल है इसलिए पैसे हैं. हमारे एमसीएफ तो मतलब बहुत गरीब है उस हिसाब से.
नहीं, सो मुंबई में एज यू सेड फाइनेंशियल कैपिटल है, रियल एस्टेट लिंक्ड फीस भी है जो उनकी रेवेन्यू सोर्स है. ऑक्ट्रॉय वाज वन बिग रेवेन्यू सोर्स वेयर एनीथिंग दैट केम इनटू द सिटी the BMC would get a tax, the octroi tax from it.
Acha, what is the octroi?
So the octroi used to be a physical tax before the VAT came, and उसके बाद फिर GST आ गया. So the GST has sort of subsumed all of them. But octroi was literally that everything that came into the city had to be taxed at a certain rate. तो उसका वो tax collection
होता था. Physical good, a person.
Physical goods. Physical good. Okay. Yeah. So the import of everything that comes into the city had to be taxed. तो वो octroi नाकाज हुआ करते थे मुंबई में in different entry points of Mumbai. And they used to be taxed there, right? And you had to declare that, bhai, मैं ये लेके जा रहा हूँ, this is the value, this is how much octroi I have to pay. So that used to happen. So there are various source of revenue for Mumbai, and of course Mumbai is the richest in India, but also one of the richest in Asia as a municipal corporation. तो बहुत पैसा है उनके पास.
So they're not cash starved at all like some of the other municipal corporations in the country.
No, they're not cash starved. In fact, their deposits are very, very high. They have a budget of about 40,000 odd crores, if I'm not wrong.
Really?
Annually. और उनके deposits तो उससे भी ज़्यादा high हैं जो उनके bank deposits है which they've been collecting over time. Incidentally, that has also become a bit of a political debate because the Prime Minister had come to Mumbai recently and he pointed to the deposits and he said ये deposit क्यों रखे हैं आपने? Why aren't you using it for the city? Now, of course, someone with slightly more sort of, fiscal conservatism would say that deposits rakhne achhe hain because you never know how your revenue streams shape out. And, what if you need more money to run the city? But unfortunately, because the Prime Minister has said it, we're seeing increasingly that वो BMC में से भी अब वो deposits में से वो projects plan हो रहे हैं. So now there is more infrastructure being created from those deposits. I mean, good or bad, we'll know in the future, but that is what is happening.
That's so fascinating that the BMC has that much money because one would never assume because I was actually looking, my friend has this chat GPT icon bot that allows you to just speak a command to the GPT and वो अपने आप बता देती है. So we were discussing this कि यार BMC के बड़े पैसे हमारे शहर के इतने पैसे नहीं है, like what's up with that? And we asked GPT what is a municipal corporation? And it told us that it's a self-governing body of sorts, a local government, to facilitate certain matters. But technically, is it appointed by the government? Is it like, are there elections for this?
There are elections for this.
Parshad ke jo hote hain, Parshad.
There is the administrative wing, which is appointed by the government, but there is the political wing, which is the elected corporator. So जैसे NCD में आपके MCD में councillors होते हैं, वैसे हमारे वहाँ भी councillors corporators होते हैं. So they are all elected by the people directly.
So some of them have political affiliations then?
All of them have political affiliations.
Even the appointees?
No, not the appointees. The appointees are government bureaucrats. But the people who are elected are all political players, basically. They are from different political parties. So all of these years, for about 25 years or so, the Shiv Sena has been in the ruling in Mumbai. Right, and most of it has been in alliance with the BJP, except maybe the last term. बाकी सारे साल वो BJP के साथ alliance में थी, but it was ruling the BMC, where it had the most number of councillors.
आपके शहर के अंदर अभी BMC कौन सी वाली है? शिवसेना, ओरिजिनल शिवसेना और शिवसेना ऑफ लाइक एकनाथ शिंदे?
It's a very interesting question because हमारे वहाँ BMC में अब कोई political wing नहीं है. The elections have been due for about 2 years now, लेकिन वो इलेक्शन हो नहीं पा रहे. क्यों, वो तो पूछना पड़ेगा सवाल, क्योंकि पॉलिटिकल हो जाएगा थोड़ा सा. लेकिन 2 साल से इलेक्शंस नहीं हो रहे हैं हमारे यहाँ. तो एज अ रिजल्ट वी डोंट हैव अ पॉलिटिकल विंग एट ऑल. वी हैव नो सिटीजन्स रिप्रेजेंटेटिव्स.
तो एलजी महाराष्ट्र चला रहा है क्या बीएमसी को?
हमारे यहाँ अभी एलजी टाइप का थोड़ा सा प्रकार हो रहा है, बट नाउ व्हाट इज हैपनिंग इज दैट द बीएमसी कमिश्नर इज रनिंग द बीएमसी डायरेक्टली. which is a bit of a problem because that post is, I mean, as I said, BMC का budget, विनम्र, अगर आप देखेंगे तो it is more than some states of India combined.
Correct.
Not just individual states are combined together. I remember when I was reporting on the BMC, we would do a graphic कि अच्छा BMC के पास कितने पैसे हैं, इतने पैसे हैं, एंड अच्छा ये 6-7 छोटे स्टेट्स हैं इंडिया के पास, इंडिया में उनके पास कितने पैसे हैं, and we would see that the BMC would have more money in their annual budget as against, you know, a couple of these or 4-5 of these different smaller states combined together. तो वो आज भी वो परिस्थिति है, and to have so much money being governed by a bureaucrat,
single man,
he's the BMC commissioner. Of course he has a process, but he's a BMC commissioner, so his order, you know, supersedes everything else, and because there is no political wing, there is no one to, you know, sort of counter or claim accountability or question. No citizen aspiration that gets featured because he doesn't have to get elected. The corporators have to get elected. तो अगर आप काम नहीं करोगे, if your area doesn't, so फरीदाबाद के सेक्टर 17 में अगर रोड नहीं बनते हैं, the councillor may not come back because विनम्र will say कि यार आपने रोड नहीं बनाया, तो मैं आपको वोट नहीं करूँगा. But the commissioner who's working, he doesn't have to worry about that because उसको यहाँ पे आके विनम्र को फेस नहीं करना है. So that is the difference between a elected body of people's representatives who are governing and only a bureaucrat who's governing.
Wow, man, I had no idea this is the case. It's basically in suspension, like the whole.
Yeah, the जैसे every assembly has a term, no? So it's the term is 5 years. Similarly, the BMC house, the corporation also has a term. वो term expire हो गया है. So technically we have no mayor, we have no corporators who exist at this point. वो पूरी political wing अब has ceased to exist till the next elections come up.
So when you go to student, जब hopefully elections होंगे and आप उस इंसान के Wikipedia पर जाओगे और उसमें preceded by वाला section होता है, वहाँ पे लिखा होगा, you know, BMC commissioner or like gap whatever.
Yeah, there'll be a gap because there is no corporator now. तो जब आप वोट करने जाओगे तो उसका टर्म हो गया खत्म 2000, मुझे लगता है 20 में या 21 में हुआ था. So that is when the term got over. So then since then there has been no other corporator in that particular area.
And जब आप इसके लिए travel कर रहे थे across the country, did you make your motives known to the people that you were interviewing that I'm going to write a book on this? Right?
Sincerely, very sincerely, because I believed, and I told you this, Vinamra, I think there is a need for us to understand what is happening in the country. ये अगर popular culture हमारा इस तरह बदल रहा है, if we are having a Hindutvaized version of popular culture, and if people in our cities don't know about it, then it's a problem. Then for me it shows that there is a lack of engagement within our society itself, where one section of the population is so immersed in this form of popular culture and the other section has no idea that this is what is being consumed.
Right.
So my earnest plea to all of these people who I've interviewed and I've gotten their consent, you know, मैंने सारा उनसे बात की है, उनसे permission ली है, was that I really just want to go and tell people about what work you do and what drives you to do the work that you do. If you see the book, you know, the book is not a judgmental take on it. It doesn't call them names. It doesn't say, you know, they're
not at all,
you know, they're this, they're that, or what, right? I mean, that was my that was something that I was very keen on, that I don't want to be casting a judgmental eye on them and sort of, you know, labeling them as one thing or other, because that is not my job as a journalist. My job as a journalist is to be the bridge between communities, right? If there is a community inside the hinterland which is engaging in a popular culture like this, and if they are enjoying it, and if the other community in the cities don't know about it, then it's a problem that I need to, as a journalist, fix by reporting on that subculture and by reporting on this popular culture. So this was my earnest plea, that I'm not going to be, you know, sort of making demons out of you or anything. I'm simply going to be taking your words. I'm going to be using your interviews, using your work to tell people about your existence. And hopefully people see what is happening in the country through this.
This morning, like most people, I was scrolling on Reels and wasting my time. But I actually found something, and I was going to bring it up here because it is about the nature of journalism itself. And this is something I've been noticing, but I haven't found a definitive answer from basically anyone on any side of the aisle, right? So I will just share this with you.
Okay.
Here, all posts. Yep. So, and my team can also just superimpose it.
Okay,
ठीक है, विभूषण मैं आपको भेज दूंगा. ठीक है. So here, why don't you just play this?
Are you a spineless journalist? Are you nervous to report a truth that could threaten a powerful institution? Now you don't have to be. With Passive Voice, the #1 tool for journalists looking to absolve those in power of responsibility for their actions. Fun! For the low, low price of your soul and journalistic integrity, you too can go from this military incursion kills 30 civilians to this 30 people have died in what may have been conflict with military. Wow, what a difference! It's like no crime was committed at all. I used to want to speak truth to power, but that was hard. Now, I don't have to put my body or career on the line. Thanks, Passive Voice. If you call now, we'll throw in a bonus. Just repeat what the cops tell you and take the government at face value package for free.
Anyway, I just wanted to share that. I laugh because I've been seeing that this is true. But you are clearly on the receiving end of this world where you've also seen many of your colleagues, basically become turncoats.
Yeah.
What मैं genuinely जानना चाहता हूँ आपसे बड़े earnestly.
Yeah.
What do you think is the state of the journalism in this country? Honestly.
I think I don't want to generalize it, because the problem with generalization is that you tend to tarnish everyone with one brush. So I don't want to generalize it, but I do want to say that most of our TV media, our electronic media is unwatchable and should not be watched, right? Because they're actively making you hate each other on the basis of your religion, sometimes your caste, and actively delegitimizing India's opposition parties. उनका एक project रहा है from 2014 onwards, where you are not questioning the government, but you're questioning the opposition at all times. As a result of that, you now have more questions that you ask of the opposition, but not of the government.
Yeah.
Right? The job of India's TV media has been to make you love your government. No questions asked at all. While you hate Muslims, while you hate Christians, while you hate anyone who questions the government, including the opposition parties. And for that reason, I tell people you should not be watching India's TV media. That much I'm sure of. On the print side, things are slightly more complicated, because while we have some of our mainstream newspapers, who've thrown in the towel, who don't even now bother to, sort of do any sort of critical journalism, investigative journalism, they're not doing that at all. But the digital space, where independent journalism still exists, there are people who are fighting. There are people who are trying to make a difference. They're trying to go out. They're trying to bring stories to you, which tell you exactly what is happening in the country. But it's very difficult to also, survive in that space. And I've been an independent journalist since 2018 now. Each time I want to travel to find out what is happening in different parts of the country, I tend to, face a stone wall where I don't have the budget to travel. मेरे पास पैसे नहीं है, because I'm a freelance journalist, but most of these media houses also don't have the money to let me travel. And a media industry which doesn't want, or which cannot afford to send people out on the field is a very, very stunted media industry, because आपका basically city को छोड़ के आपका coverage ही नहीं हो रहा है. You're not being able to show a majority of the city, a majority of the country to your people. So in effect, what you end up showing is what comes on your social media feeds, or what happens in and around you. तो आपकी खबरें अगर आप देखेंगे are mostly from cities now, right? Or places where there has been some social media post कि एक गांव में ये हो गया था तो वो social media post आ गया.
Correct.
And as a
Social
result
media
of it,
posts, yeah.
So that is your aggregation now. Reporters have been replaced by social media streams, and that's an immensely big problem for all of us. What is happening is, as a result of the fact that critical journalism nahi bachi, and journalism that lets you go out and report, we don't know of what is happening in our country deeper down. The story that I tell through my book H-Pop is a story that should have ideally been known to people a long time ago, because these are not players who've come up overnight. मैंने 4 साल लगाए हैं किताब लिखने के लिए, but ये लोग तो उसके पे पहले से काम कर रहे थे. Kamal Agne, for instance, the poet in my book, he's been doing poetry since 2017, right? Sandeep Dev, who's a publishing house owner, he is a Hindutva influencer and so on. He's been doing his work for a very long time now. But we don't know of these worlds because we are not allowing our media to go out and get these stories. We're not seeing how society is being shaped one way or the other. So as a result of which, I would say that Indian journalism is in a very precarious state, where there are people who are trying to do good work, But the louder, even if it's a minority, but the louder section of the media, which is the Delhi-based media, most sections of it are so compromised, especially the TV part of it is so heavily compromised that it is good for the country and good for your health and good for the health of democracy if you don't watch these channels.
When you talk about no budget or no funds for traveling across the country, पहले field में investigate करना वगैरह, was that the norm like in the 2000s or 2005, 10? Like before you were freelance, like were you going out across the world and in India to cover important long form stories?
So it used to work in different ways. Before that, I was with the Hindustan Times for about 6 years or so. वहाँ पे भी there were problems where if we had to go out, we used to be faced with a lot of questions कि आपको क्यों जाना है, what is the story. But then ultimately you find your way and you do go out, right? Since then, what has happened is the government has adopted a way stricter sort of approach towards the media in terms of giving it advertisements, in terms of hiking the price of the newsprint on which the papers are printed, for instance, right? Tax बढ़ा दिया आपने COVID के वक्त. A result of all of this and a result of also the changing media space, where now advertisers are increasingly seeing the benefits of sponsoring digital media content, because that is where the ad spend is more. Right, so the ad spend on newspapers is decreasing. The government now is very careful on who it wants to support and who it doesn't. So if it sees that there is a pliable media house, then it will want to reward it with more advertising money. But if you are someone who's doing critical media reporting, then it will want to pull out its ads, or it might want to switch off the patronage that the government gives you through ad money. So there's all of that, and of course there's the other thing, which is that we've also seen in the recent times harassment of journalists. Right, we've seen what happens with NewsClick just a couple of months ago.
I don't know the story. क्या story है?
So the NewsClick has been again, it's a left-leaning media outlet, but it's been doing reporting and it brings stories from different parts of the country. It's been rather vibrant in the kind of stories that it's been able to bring, even if you say that it has an ideological slant. On the basis of a New York Times article, which said that NewsClick was a part of this this guy's network, and he was a pro-China voice, and sort of he was doing propaganda at the behest of the CCP. On the behest and on the basis of that New York Times article, the NewsClick was raided. Its founder editor has been jailed since then, and he's in his 70s. That editor, he's a legendary editor in journalism circles. He was arrested by Indira Gandhi during the emergency. So now he's being arrested by another regime which claims that we're all in a perfect sense of democracy at this point. The NewsClick now finds its accounts frozen. उनके पास अब पैसे नहीं है, उनको वो accounts भी freeze हो गए हैं. परसों की बात है. As a result of which, its reporting is directly suffering. It may not be able to send reporters out anymore. It may not be able to do the kind of journalism it wants to do anymore. We've not just seen that with News Laundry. We've seen it with so many people. सिद्दीक कपन का एग्जाम्पल ले लीजिए आप. वो आदमी ने जेल में इतना टाइम बिताया only because he was going to cover the Hathras gang rape case, the gang rape and murder case, right? Yeah. On the basis that he was suspected to be a member of the Students' Federation of India, or the Popular Front of India, one of the two, right? And again, when the Supreme Court gave him bail, it realized that there is very little evidence to show that he had anything to do with any of these. Right? तो आप एक जर्नलिस्ट को ऐसी but on the basis of suspicion आप उसको अंदर कर देते हो. This is something that we've seen repeatedly in different parts of the country and against different journalists. So why are we seeing this? There is a growing trend of journalism and journalists being under attack by the regime. It's very clear that if you choose to be pliable and if you choose to report pro-government stuff, you will not be harmed. But if you choose to go against the government, then there will be consequences. A simple example is the BBC. The BBC shows that documentary which talks about Narendra Modi and his time as the Gujarat CM and how he failed to control the Gujarat riots. And what happens is the BBC documentary is banned, and immediately after we see raids on the BBC. I'm sorry. Why is that happening?
There was a witch hunt against them.
There is a witch hunt against independent media in general.
I'm not sure कि मैं अपना क्या opinion बनाऊँ उसके बारे में, because overwhelmingly my Twitter was filled with anti-BBC articles and it was very convenient. मतलब मेरे को उस टाइम पे ऐसा लगा हाँ BBC तो बेकार है ही, And now that I think I'm not sure because I don't want to say something preliminary because again I'll have to do my research. But right now I feel like I used to place a lot of trust in that as an institution, just as I would do in the Hindustan Times or any other legendary journalism outlet that you sort of look at as the gold standard of that particular domain. मुझे लगा कि हाँ यार ये तो बड़े एंटी इंडिया टाइप के लोग हैं. But that's what I saw on my Twitter. Like everyone was very against it, and everyone on both sides completely dismissed the documentary. अब I don't know कि वो कितना पीछे से propaganda था या क्या था, but
my problem is in, again, BBC might be an example of this, but I think what we are now seeing is that any journalism that is critical of the government's policies, right, is very easily shut down by saying it is anti-India, right? A piece of journalism that is anti-government is not anti-India because the government is a government. It's an elected government.
It's not the country itself.
It's not the country. It's not an attack on the country. If this is the logic, then all of those scams that we saw during the UP era, everything, right, from the coal scam to the 2G scam to the CWG scam, were all of those attacks on India?
No.
Because at that point we saw the opposition, which is now the ruling party, the BJP, coming out and flashing the newspapers and saying, "Ye dekho kya kar rahe hain government." So those attacks, which were on the government, which were investigating the government's irregularities, were attacks on the government. They were not attacks on India. But now, when a journalist tries to do very similar work and investigates the government's policies, they're anti-India. I mean, how did this change? How did the definition of what is anti-India and what is anti-government change? ये कब हुआ? ये क्या new India में हुआ है? That is the question that we must ask. And I think it's fair to ask questions, very hard questions of media outlets like the BBC that you mentioned, right? I think as the readers, it is our duty and it is our right to be questioning them if we spot inaccuracies, if we spot propaganda, if we spot an agenda. But let's talk about the facts, right? Let's talk about it on the basis of what is a hard fact and whether it is accurate, whether it is not. Let's not tarnish anything, and I mean anything. It can be from any of the news organizations. But just because you don't like what the article's findings are or what you don't like about the documentary and its final findings, if you shut it down by calling it anti-India, it basically means there will be no critical journalism of the government, which is talking about the government's irregularities. I keep asking people, I said, what do you want? Do you want to live in a la-la land where the government can do what it wants? You'll never know any of it. And the only thing that you will get is WhatsApp messages saying ki ye ban gaya, wo ban gaya, ye ho gaya, wo ho gaya. Is that the la-la land that the citizens of the country want to live in? I think the answer for me is very clear. The answer is no. I want to be an informed citizen. I want to know exactly what the government is up to, right? It's not anti-national to be asking questions of your government. It is our constitutional right as citizens.
Oh, it's a very elaborate PR exercise to label criticism as anti-national because it places you in the same league as terrorists and as seditionists, which is very, very wrong. But
Absolutely.
it's just the way it's labeled that it's far better to just go along for the ride and trust the government and the Prime Minister. I wanted to ask you, yaar, as a consequence, during the writing of this book, देश में कहाँ घूमने को मिला और उसके चक्कर में कोई particular incident से कहानियाँ that struck out to you as amusing. Perhaps it could be, say, the way Tier 3 India lives in a way that is different than ours, right? Tier 1 India की बात करें, या फिर other incidents या other players in this economy. Like one thing you mentioned is कि ये जो गानों की तरह गानों को co-opt करना अपनी ideology और propaganda फैलाने के लिए कोई नई चीज़ नहीं है ये. And one example I could think of is, when I was in college, this is a really bad joke, but ISIS was like the ISIS was basically taking over Iraq at that point. So my roommate was like a big fan of communist Russia. He had all these posters, everything, sab kuch, pura fan tha wo. So as a joke, we played the ISIS anthem. It's called Salilul Sawarim, something like that. It's called the Clash of Swords in English. We found that very funny. But then हमने बड़ा डर लगा कि हमारे को US government crackdown ना कर ले. Like all three of them were Americans, I was Indian. But it proved to me कि even the ISIS, a terrorist organization, had a song that they would play. And I'm sure कि जब जो भी इंसान उन्होंने उसके अंदर रिक्रूट करा है, वो सुनता होगा, उसके अंदर उसके रोंगटे खड़े होते होंगे कि ये मेरा मिशन है, ये मेरे को करना है इस तरह से, राइट? एंड व्हाट वी आर टॉकिंग अबाउट इज बेसिकली, इट्स नॉट लाइक म्यूजिक इन संस्कृत, इट्स नॉट म्यूजिक दैट्स लाइक वेरी archaic, it's very like बड़ा ही फोक्सी और बड़ा ही इन ट्यून विद द टाइम्स है. साइकेडेलिक बीट्स हैं, डिचिक डिचिक बहुत ज़्यादा है, राइट? सो दैट इट्स वेरी लाइक नॉर्मलाइज्ड. तो उस सेंस के अंदर, फ्रॉम अ म्यूजिकल स्टैंड पॉइंट, फ्रॉम योर ट्रैवल्स, एनी अदर पर्टिकुलर इंसिडेंट्स दैट स्ट्रक आउट टू यू?
I think what you're saying is very interesting, Vinamra, because what we don't realize about music very often, and what we generally don't realize about the power of pop culture, कि वो कितना powerful है, right? You mentioned the ISIS and the anthem. I mean, one thing that we often forget is that some of the biggest leaders of the Al-Qaeda, for instance, including Osama bin Laden, used to write poetry, right? And that poetry used to be used to, to try and appeal to possibly new recruits or to keep the existing recruits inspired. आप चलिए, आप अल-कायदा छोड़ दीजिए. If you look at the exact opposite side of the divide, right, which is the US military, when it went to countries like Iraq and Afghanistan, what we saw in those countries, and there is research about it, is how when they were sent on missions where they could possibly be killing civilians as well, they were made to listen to songs which were hard rock, which was death metal, because the songs, and the research quotes that the songs put their minds in a state where killings were then very okay, right? Killings were much more possible and plausible.
Killing in the name of it's a song.
Yeah, so I think we forget that music can do that, right? Similarly, let's sort of come closer to home. Let's go to Myanmar. We've been seeing how the Rohingyas have been massacred. We've been seeing how there's been a genocide against the Rohingyas. What we've not seen is the fact that even in Myanmar, there has been a whole stream of music that has been targeted towards the existence of Rohingya Muslims, right? The music is actually somewhat similar in the sense that the Hindutva music that we see, which is constantly demonizing the Muslims, for instance, right? In Myanmar, the music constantly demonized the Rohingya Muslims. It sought to conflate how to be a Myanmarese is basically to be a Buddhist. If you're not a Buddhist, then you're not a Myanmarese, which is what we often see in the Hindutva rhetoric. कि अगर आप हिंदू हो तो आप यहाँ के हो. If you're not a Hindu, then you don't really belong here. Then you're living here, but you don't really belong here. So there are very concrete examples of how popular culture has been used to create this sense of othering. कि हम हैं और आप हो. We are not the same people, right? There is music, there is poetry, even books, and there are all examples of how popular culture has been continuously deployed. तो ये हम जो इंडिया में देख रहे हैं, there is precedents, of various parts of the country, various parts of the world, in fact, where this has been employed as a very tried and tested method. It's just that we've not been able to conceptualize कि ये ऐसे भी हो सकता है, कि songs can be driving hatred between us, right? Or music or poetry can be used to sort of, wanting to kill each other off. But that is what is happening. In semi-rural and rural India, I think what we often forget is आज हमारा social media का ज़माना है. So algorithms keep throwing up things that are similar, and you send it to your friend and the friend sends a meme back to you, and you're constantly doing that. As a result, we're all listening to very similar things. We're all watching the same things because we're all on Netflix, Amazon, and things like that. Our worlds have shrunk in that sense, right? You can call up your friend in the US and you'd still be possibly watching the same show and you can discuss the show. तो हमको लग रहा है सब यही कर रहे हैं. Right? Everyone's listening to the same thing, everyone's watching the same thing. But when you go into the hinterlands, you see that the social, the social consumption and the cultural consumption in these places, it's very different from what you and I would listen to. Like I would go to these places and I would see that, songs like Har Ghar Bhagwa Chayega, that used to be the caller tune, right? Or that used to be the song that would be played in the buses, not an Arijit Singh song. That would be the song that would be played in functions. College festivals में आप चले जाओ तो ये हिंदुत्व के गाने बजते हैं. They're not playing Ritviz or any of the other stuff, right? So I think it teaches you a lot about how there is a false sense of homogeneity. आज इंटरनेट की वजह से हमको लग रहा है कि we're all very similar now. We're all looking at the same stuff. But actually the internet has also given scope for everyone to be able to do their thing.
Yeah.
So a Vinamra can exist, but so can a Kavi sing. and both can have audiences.
Yeah, it's so funny that you say that because, you know, people often say, irrespective of what the polls say, the BJP always gets electoral victories. But I think most of the pollsters, and I could be completely wrong, and the journalists and the political brass reporting on elections happens to be in the concentric, मतलब वो tier 1, tier 2 constituency में हो जाएंगे. Tier 3, tier 4 के अंदर तो voter turnout हमेशा ज़्यादा ही होता है. We've often seen that, right? Yeah. So it serves to prove that just because what we see on our Twitter is overwhelmingly in the support of one ideology, the rest of the country is so big and we're so small just because we think we have a more tangible ecosystem for discourse. हमको लगता है कि हम जो सोच रहे हैं हमारे सामने जो आ रहा है यही होगा, but होता कुछ और है. Have you seen share chat at all?
Yeah, I have.
Share chat.
Yeah.
Did you see people using share chat?
They used to. I mean, so again, after TikTok went, that was one of the other things that came, right? There was, I think there was also Takatak, which was
MX Takatak,
MX Takatak, which was again a very popular thing. When I remember when I would travel, people would be watching stuff on MX Player a lot because वो free था, right? So they were not consuming, again, as I said, they were not consuming the same Netflix, Amazon stuff that you and I were.
Right.
They were watching stuff on MX Player, which was again free, which had a very different branding to it, which had a very different feel to it. तो वो बहुत अलग-अलग चीज़ें कर रहे थे वो लोग, and they were creating content, they were watching, and what happens is some of the content that comes out of there is repackaged for people like us to call it cringe.
Yeah.
राइट हम जो क्रिंज कर रहे हैं और हम वो क्रिंज जो देख रहे हैं एंड वी थिंक अरे ये तो क्रिंज कंटेंट है बट दैट्स ऑल कंटेंट दैट इज ऑल इमिनेटिंग फ्रॉम देयर बट वी थ्रू आवर लेंस एंड थ्रू आवर मे बी बायस एज वेल आर वॉचिंग इट एंड सेइंग नहीं यार दिस इज नॉट क्लासी इनफ यू नो सो लेट्स कॉल इट क्रिंज सो दैट इज ऑल्सो व्हाट इज हैपनिंग
या मैं तो आई एम अ बिग बिलीवर इन वॉचिंग ऑल काइंड्स ऑफ कंटेंट यू वांट टू बी शेकन अप फ्रॉम योर स्लीप बिकॉज एक तरह की कंटेंट हेजेमोनी बना रखी है शहर के लोगों ने ना और जो आता भी है वो इट कम्स इन द फॉर्म ऑफ मीम्स बिकॉज देयर इज अ क्लियर क्लास डिवाइड.
एब्सोल्युटली.
तो बहुत सारे लोग बोलते हैं विनम्र आप क्रिंज कंटेंट को बिकॉज इफ यू गो व्हेन आई एम ऑन माय इंस्टाग्राम स्टोरीज नो आई शेयर द मोस्ट विशियस मीम्स पॉसिबल राइट बिकॉज आई एम जनरली एंजॉइंग दैट नाउ समवन हु इज इन अ विलेज लाइक कॉल्ड पावटा और पलवल अब उनको अधिकार मिल रहा है बनाने का. पलवल इज स्टिल लाइक प्रीटी क्लोज टू फरीदाबाद. अब और चले जाओ जहाँ पे यू नो relatively what is the right word like phone dark areas or delivery dark areas I think something like that. वहाँ पे से जिस तरह का कंटेंट बनेगा जैसे कि अब लोग खेत में जा रहे हैं चलकर कुछ भी है तो उसको देख के आप बोलोगे हाय हाय ये तो बेकार है बिकॉज आपका नैरेटिव साइडली मुंबई दिल्ली बैंगलोर हैदराबाद यहाँ पे सेट हो रहा है. बट आई थिंक इवेंचुअली व्हाट्स गोना हैपन इज this segment of the population is going to overpower because it's already on Instagram now. Look at what Instagram is right now. It used to be photos of food. It used to be a very aristocratic, pleasure-centric medium. Photos of food, photos of places. Then Reels came around. Then Reels got so saturated. Then Tier 2, Tier 3, Tier 4 Reels came around. Then they got copied into memes. And अभी भी अगर लोग सोचते हैं ना कि यार ये cringe content हमें देखना चाहिए. I think cringe is in the eyes of the beholder. 100%. I think what you're struggling with is you can't stand the fact that someone who's not of the same socioeconomic class and means has 1 million views, is doing well, and your thing that you posted about your, I don't know, specialty coffee is not doing well at all.
100%.
And so that disparity, that assumed hegemony over social media is going. और लोगों को दिक्कत हो रही है इस चीज़ से.
I think there's also the sense of seeing content which is more aspirational for you. So you want to class up.
Yeah.
So you see content which is one class above yours, right? You say, अच्छा ये ऐसे रहते हैं. अच्छा, so this is how a table is laid. अच्छा, this is the kind of cutlery they use, right? Anything that is below your class is cringe.
Yeah.
Right? So if your influencer is posting holiday photos from, I don't know, a Scandinavian country or like Peru or you know, Chile, or you say, अरे wow, अच्छा यहाँ पे भी जा सकते हैं. Right? This is the way to be. Because you want to copy it. This is aspiration. नीचे नहीं देखना आपको. Because यार वो क्यों देखना? I don't want to go there.
Yeah.
वो देख के मैं बोल रहा हूँ ये तो cringe है. The stuff that is happening ahead of me or above my class is what is aspirational and that is what I want to see. And ये हर class में होता है. ये सिर्फ हमारी class की बात नहीं. I think every class, because I often go to villages where I talk to farmers a lot. And they tell me, they say, you know, Kunal, we see content, like we see Instagram reels and stuff, and, you know, people are living in the cities, people are posting photos of going to the movies, you know, going out and eating. और हम कहते हैं यार हमारी ज़िंदगी में तो ये कुछ भी नहीं है. यू नो वी आर वेटिंग फॉर द रेन्स. बारिश नहीं आई तो प्रॉब्लम है, बारिश बहुत ज़्यादा आ गई तो प्रॉब्लम है. तो हमारी लाइफ तो ऐसी ही है. बट यू नो लुक एट द पीपल इन द सिटीज़, उनकी लाइफ तो बहुत अच्छी है. सो देन व्हेन यू गो टू द सिटीज़ पीपल से अरे यार मैं क्या, मतलब मैं तो नागपुर में बैठा हूँ. लुक एट पीपल इन मुंबई, उनकी लाइफ बहुत अच्छी है. व्हेन यू कम टू मुंबई पीपल से अरे आई एम ओके बट लुक एट पीपल इन लंदन.
हाँ, वो लंदन
Right?
लंदन वाले कह रहे हैं यार वो सब तो ठीक है, वो लोग तो न्यूयॉर्क में और भी ज़्यादा कर रहे हैं.
Exactly.
There is no end to this.
There is no end to it, right? There is no end to it, sir.
Sometimes certain journalists जो particularly they don't usually write books, they write articles or they're like commissioned, they have a tenured job.
Right.
They don't always write the best books.
Yeah. They're not able to because you're used to writing 300 words.
अच्छा.
आपको उतना ही, आपका अगर न्यूज़पेपर हो आर्टिकल है तो 300 वर्ड लिखना है आपको.
हाँ.
बुक्स आर 90,000 वर्ड, तो आपका वो फ्लो ही नहीं आता है.
No, but still, like, even if you're writing 300 words, no, you can still do 300 into 30,000 or 300 into 30. You know what I mean? Like, you can write small paragraph wale passages. What I'm saying is, sometimes I find that I'm reading books and they're just first drafts with full of jargon. And because the author is of pedigree,
उसको पता है कि क्या करना है.
हाँ, pedigree और prestige जिस author के पास है ना, in a different field, it's almost like the bad writing is excused.
Yeah.
And I think bad writing should never be excused. Like, if you set out to write a book, just write a book.
Yeah.
Put all of your heart into it. ये नहीं कि ना मैं वहाँ पे भी मैंने उधर भी effort नहीं डाला, तो कहाँ डाला आपने effort?
हाँ, फिर बुक में भी नहीं डाला तो क्या किया आपने? I agree. मतलब
So,
आप
yeah.
जी तोड़ मेहनत करके आप करो पूरा, लेकिन
Yeah, no, that's why I think the book is written very well.
I'm glad.
Is this world still growing at a rapid pace? Are there more? Because I'll tell you what. I remember जैसे ये है ना, एक बड़ा अब ये चीज़ मीम बन गई है. But back in the day, I thought it was very funny when Akhilesh Yadav was no longer the CM of UP, and Yogi had just entered his first term. तो कोई एक सिंगर है, वो मुस्लिम सिंगर है, मुझे पता नहीं, उसने बड़ा फनी सा गाना बनाया था. I don't think it was so inflammatory, just like it was a longing nostalgic song. It's like at full auto tune. कब आओगे मेरे अखिलेश तुम्हें यूपी. Have you heard that?
No, I haven't.
No, it's a great song. It's a great song. But it's basically like a UP Muslim longing for an Akhilesh Yadav government, which is very sensitive to Yadavs and Muslims, right? Generally. तो मैंने ये तो notice करा कि ये चल रहा है. उस time पे ही देख लिया था. And then there's this very popular song जिसमें कई सारे just like आपने बोला ना कि इसमें बता नहीं सकते कि कौन इस गाने का author है, because they use the same lyrics and chorus, है ना?
बिल्कुल.
It's the same in the Gujar and Jat communities also, because they have figured out कि जाट का छोरा and गुजर का छोरा are the template. उस पर 3600 गाने हैं.
Right.
All with same auto-tune, different. बस गुजर का छोरा ले जाएगा, गुजर का छोरा ले जाएगा, जाट का छोरा ले जाएगा, क्या ले जाएगा, no one knows. तो I also noticed the song called Shri Ram Janki. It's very famous. And it's such a good song because I've jived to it in the trains with my friends. हम सब chill कर रहे हैं और उसमें पीछे जो सबसे खतरनाक टाइप की मनाली साइड ट्रांस बीट्स होती है ना, रेव पार्टी वाली, वो वाली बीट्स हैं. सो दैट सॉन्ग इज नॉट पोलराइजिंग एट ऑल. इट इज सिंपली टॉकिंग अबाउट श्री राम एंड हनुमान का रिश्ता. बट आई नोटिस्ड शायद मैं वो गाना अगर घर वाले भजन फॉर्म में सुनते हैं, मैं कभी ना सुनता. बट बिकॉज आई एम फ्रॉम अ जनरेशन वेयर hypnotic psychedelic beats is something I'm comfortable with. Religious content packaged in that becomes very like endeared to me. That is not outside my domain. It feels like it's part of my world, right?
Yeah. I think one thing that has happened in this particular world is that they've realized that hate doesn't have to be boring, right? To make you hate someone doesn't mean that we have to get you to listen to an old hag speaking at a political rally, or it doesn't mean you have to attend a rally where there is a hate speech कि कोई तुमको नेता आके बता रहा है कि you have to hate this one, hate that one, right? The most insidious and the most powerful part about Hindutva pop culture is the fact that hate, it can make you hate, but it can also entertain you at the same time. So you're getting entertained while the prejudice against Muslims, against Christians, against critics is getting reinforced in your head.
It's also true with dank memes.
Yeah, it's also true with dank memes. Exactly.
Yeah, because I remember if I keep watching dank memes of any particular genre, if I go and look at my attitudes around that genre, मेरे attitude बदल चुके होते हैं. But it's a systematic immersion in that world.
It's a slow, everyday sort of, radicalization, right? It's not telling you that, listen, I'm radicalize you. I'm radicalizing you. It doesn't tell you that I'm radicalizing you. It doesn't tell you that you are at a political rally, तो आपको ये भाषण सुनना है. It's saying, you want to be entertained, I'll make you play this song, right? You want to be entertained some more, I will make you play this song, and I'll make you play that song. Similarly, you want to be entertained, I'll make you hear a poetry. So you in your head are, taking this very lightly. You're saying, okay, this is just a song. But if the song is fantasizing about a genocide against Muslims or Christians, then it's not just a song, right? It may have the most psychedelic beats that you've ever heard. But the words still remain the same. The words remain that, as you said, agar छुआ मंदिर तो तुम्हें दिखा देंगे, तुमको तेरी औकात बता देंगे, right? So it's constantly putting that enemy in its place. And if there's a constant reiteration, if you keep listening to it, you're going to absorb that message, right? And I think they've realized that hateful stuff can be entertaining. It doesn't have to be pedantic. It doesn't have to be boring. It doesn't have to be a speech. It can be something which is very, very popular, which is very entertaining, and it reaches a lot more people that way. The other thing that can happen, Vinamra, with this is that you can never really detach yourself because it's not an event anymore. क्या होता था? Hate and hateful speech and hateful conduct became events, right? So a hate speech is an event, a political rally is an event, a communal riot is an event. But with popular culture, it's never an event because it's an ongoing process which is continuously playing out in the background. No one's noticing it because it's happening on a day-to-day basis.
Yeah.
If there's a political rally where there's a hate speech, then there will be at least 3 media reports, right? People will say, oh, someone's done this. Someone might try and file a police complaint against it. The Prime Minister, when he travels abroad, will get a question about why you're allowing hateful speeches to go on. So to avoid all of those inconveniences, there is Hindutva pop culture, which is doing exactly that, which is telling you exactly the same thing that the hate speech tells you, that you must fear the Muslims, that there is an existential threat from them, that they're out to kill you, and hence you must think of killing them or tackling them. They're saying the exact same words, but they're just putting it to a tune. Or they're just putting it in a rhyme so that you can feel like you're not really exactly consuming political content. You're just being entertained. While none of the people get questioned, right? So the Prime Minister doesn't get questioned after that. The CM doesn't get questioned after that. The local district magistrate maybe doesn't get questioned that, why are you allowing a hate speech there? Because it's everywhere. Because it's happening on a day-to-day, 24/7 basis. You're listening to the songs, you're watching the poetry, you're reading
social media
the book.
feed is full of that.
Full of that, because you've liked it once, it's going to keep throwing up. So that is the more insidious part, and that is the part that is very dangerous, because we don't realize that we are being radicalized in the process of just listening to a song or listening to a poetry or reading a book.
And where can people find this book?
The book is available everywhere. I am going to be, going to different parts of the country as well, signing books, doing events, talking about it. The book is also available on e-commerce platforms.
I got it from Kindle.
Okay. But if you can try and support bookstores, it's going to be available in bookstores everywhere. It already is. So try and support independent bookstores which are stocking this book. And I hope that they enjoy it.
Yeah, thank you so much. I will say, अच्छी बात है bookstores को support करना, but you would never get notes like this.
That is true.
This is the one wonderful thing about the Kindle. No sponsorship from Kindle, by the way. Is you can highlight the parts that you find interesting and then email them to you.
Yeah.
Which is very good for if you're trying to do a podcast and you want to have the facts here. I see that you've done it the old school way with the.
I've got these
with the stickers. Yeah.
These notes that I make. So all of my books are like that.
Both work. 2 types of toppers in a class.
Both have topped.
ठीक है यार. Thank you so much. Thank you for continuing to do journalism in a way, despite the pushback that there is in the country against journalism. The institution of journalism, as we see, is crumbling, at least in certain domains. And thank you for honestly portraying this world that many would not even dare to touch because of being harassed or criticized or being scoundreled of their money.
Yeah. No, I mean, thank you for giving me a platform. I think people just should maybe read the book to understand what is happening with the country. And no matter what the political stance is, I think the question that we need to ask is whether we are comfortable being at a war with ourselves, right? Are we comfortable with constantly demonizing people around us? Or do we want to live in a country which is, more peaceful, more harmonious? Do we really want this sort of constant thought around us that, people around us might be out to kill you or to, sort of take your girls away and stuff? I think we need to ask ourselves these questions and whether that is the country that we see going ahead, because I can't think of too many countries which were not at peace with itself and yet were able to do well in the long term, right?
Yeah.
In the short term, the economy will boom, the stock markets will go up. But in the long term, I think the society and societal infrastructure is what is more important. So I hope that people do pick up the book and people see the point in engaging, the point in understanding what is happening with our country.
Great, man. Thank you so much for your time.
Thank you so much, Vinay.
Thank you.
Thank you.
This was Dostcast with Kunal Purohit. Don't forget to subscribe. We'll see you on the next episode.